Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video of Fox Flicks on Kazakhstan, aka In a Nutshell. And today, we're actually going to do a double feature. First, we're going to see what happens when a supervolcano blows up on Earth, and the second, we're going to see about why we don't shoot nuclear waste into outer space. First, let's check out the volcano video.
The Earth is a gigantic ball of semi-molten rock with a heart of iron as hot as the surface of the sun. Titanic amounts of heat left over from its birth and the radioactive decay of trillions of tons of radioactive elements find no escape but up. Currents of rock spanning thousands of kilometers carry this energy to the surface.
Sometimes
Earth's
fast,
crust
but
is the
always
only
very
thing in their
slow.
way. It feels solid to us, but it's only a fragile barrier, an apple skin around a flaming behemoth.
Well, that's
True
something.
apocalypses can break through and unleash eruptions tens of times more powerful than all of our nuclear weapons combined, subjecting the climate to centuries worth of change in a single year, while drowning continents in toxic ash and
A
gases.
disastrous
Supervolcanoes. How big can they get?
Like Yellowstone.
And will they put an end to humanity?
I mean, I'm going to say yes, that could destroy humanity, considering that these things can cause, well, pretty much a nuclear winter. Crap. And we're back. Let's continue on with the volcanoes.
Volcanoes. There are many types of volcanoes, from towering mountains to lava domes, but they have two main sources. The first is at the boundaries between tectonic plates, the pieces of the crust that cover the Earth like a giant jigsaw
that would
puzzle.
make sense.
There are 7 major tectonic plates and dozens of smaller ones, drifting against each other at up to 15 centimeters per year. This sounds slow,
very
but on
slow.
geological timescales, it is a titanic struggle over who gets to stay on the surface. The winning plate crumples into a new mountain range, while the loser is shoved underneath into an ocean of hot rock at 1,300 degrees Celsius, the
lithosphere.
asthenosphere. The temperature here is enough to melt rock into a liquid, but the insane pressures of all that mass keep it a superheated solid. Tectonic plates are usually in contact with water for thousands of years and absorb some of it. When they're submerged into the hot underworld, this water triggers chemical transformations that allow tiny portions to melt into magma. Liquid magma is less dense than solid rock, so it rises to the surface in furious bubbles that accumulate in sponge-like reservoirs right under the crust. If enough magma accumulates, it becomes powerful enough to pierce through the crust, which we experience as volcanoes. This happens under the winning plate, like a revenge attack by the loser before it's erased forever. The second main source of volcanoes are thought to be mantle plumes. These are columns of abnormally hot rock that rise all the way from the planet's core mantle boundary to the surface. Much less is known about them, but in a way, it's as if the Earth's mantle has weather patterns and mantle plumes are a little like hot air rising to form storm clouds. Storms hundreds of millions of years old, made of rock circulating at a rate of a few millimeters per month. They don't care about the motion of tectonic plates, so they can break the crust to create volcanoes in the middle of nowhere that stubbornly stay active as the crust shifts around them. The volcanic boom meter. Scientists love to put big booms on a scale, and came up with a logarithmic scale that measures the volume ejected during an eruption. The Volcanic Explosivity Index, or VEI. Simply put, it starts really small and gets very big very quickly.
Look at 8. You can't
A
even see it.
VEI2 eruption would fill 400 full Olympic swimming pools with lava. We have around 10 of these per year. At VEI3, we already see devastating effects, like the eruption of the Semeru volcano in 2021 that destroyed thousands of homes in Indonesia. At VEI5, we see catastrophic amounts of materials, cubic kilometers of debris, equivalent to an entire lake of molten rock blasted into the air. Like the 2022 Hunga Tonga Hunga Hapai eruption that sent a shockwave around the globe many times and created ocean-wide tsunamis. At a VEI of 6, an eruption can change the world. In 1883, the Indonesian island volcano Krakatoa erupted nearly continuously over the course of 5 months. One of those eruptions blew it apart, producing the loudest sound recorded in history. 10 trillion times louder than a rocket taking off, heard halfway around the world. 30-meter high tsunamis swept away nearby populations, and so much gas and ash were released the global temperatures cooled by nearly 0.5 degrees Celsius. Red, dusty sunsets followed for many years.
Oh boy.
At VEI 7, we get supercolossal eruptions, millennium-defining events that human civilization has only encountered a handful of times. Mount
let's hope we
Tambora
actually
was a
don't
4,300-meter
encounter
high
more of
mountain
those.
until it exploded in 1815 and released 400 times more energy than the Tsar Bomba. 140 billion tons of ash and dust were shot halfway to space before smothering the world's skies, turning them a sickly yellow. There was no summer the following year, crops died, and over 100,000 people perished. This is the dreadful potential of volcanic eruptions, with famines across the other side of the world and even centuries-long cold periods being attributed to them.
Oh boy.
Okay, but what's a supervolcano? The term supervolcano is a media invention and not a scientific term.
Oh.
The main issue with them is that not every
that's
eruption from a supervolcano is a super eruption. What makes supervolcanoes special is that they've been waiting to erupt for hundreds of thousands of years. Pressure builds up in colossal magma reservoirs several kilometers deep until it becomes strong enough to lift the rock above it by several meters.
Oh.
Rocks crack under the pressure until they finally give way and billions of tons of gas and ash blast out at supersonic speed.
Oh, like a
An
zip.
insane explosion of
I
at
know
least
that's
1,000
gross, but
cubic
come on.
kilometers that impacts every corner of the globe. And yet, that is only a small portion of the magma reservoir. Super eruptions are like a boiling pot of water, popping its lid off and spitting a bit off the top. Afterwards, the ground collapses into the void left behind, forming a hole called a caldera. Under this caldera, pressure starts building again until the volcano gathers enough energy for another super eruption. But this could take hundreds of thousands of years. It's estimated that one of the few volcanoes capable of super eruptions on Earth could cause a catastrophic eruption every 17,000 years on average. That would make them far more frequent than comparable asteroid impacts. The most recent super eruption is the Oronui eruption 26,500 years ago in New Zealand.
Oh, what the?
With the force of dozens of billions of tons of TNT, a Mount Everest-sized pile of explosives, a huge portion of the landscape was scooped out and thrown into the atmosphere.
Impressive.
It left behind a caldera spanning 20 kilometers, and it caused the entire southern hemisphere to undergo a period of abrupt cooling. Though among super eruptions, it's a mere firework.
Bad.
The Lake Toba eruption of 74,000 years ago was a much more significant turning point in history. It released a gargantuan 5,300 cubic kilometers of material, enough to blanket parts of South Asia, in 15 centimeters of ash and trigger a rapid 4 degrees Celsius drop in global temperatures. It's possible that the volcanic winter lasted 10 years, followed by worldwide droughts for centuries. Earth's climate might have not recovered for 1,000 years. The largest volcanic events we know of were not really huge explosions, but floods of millions of cubic kilometers of lava.
Oh, that's even
The grand
worse.
finale were the Siberian traps around 250 million years ago, a continuous release of lava for 2 million years. They raised the ocean temperatures to over 40 degrees Celsius, which caused the Permian-Triassic extinction, killing over 90% of all species.
And
Earth's
wow.
surface needed 9 million
It
years
just straight
to
up went
recover.
oven.
These
on the
sorts of
Earth.
eruptions don't change the climate, they are the climate. But thankfully,
That's funny.
we haven't seen anything even remotely close to that scale in many millions of years. So, should you be scared of supervolcanoes? Definitely not. They've been used to frighten many people and are overhyped as an unavoidable apocalypse. The most famous one, Yellowstone, will erupt again, but they will be relatively small eruptions. Natural disasters for sure, but not enough to devastate the US or come close to ending humanity.
Okay, so
The
more just like
chance of
little
a VEI
pots
8
just
eruption in the
there.
next few hundred
Okay,
years
that makes
is
sense.
less than 2%, and more importantly, it wouldn't come as a sudden surprise. However, less powerful but more frequent eruptions can also do serious damage to our civilizations and are in many ways a much greater concern. So we must watch for slow changes in magma.
That is actually something to think about. Would you rather feel something that could take a long time to explode, or, well, a long time, but it's a big one, or multiple happening at the same time, but they're small ones? Well, just like with dominoes, it all starts with one tipping over.
Reservoirs, like ground swelling and temperature increases, to get an early warning that can save the lives of people living the closest to a volcano. And there's time to develop solutions that can remove sulfur and ash from the stratosphere to eliminate the root cause of the climate disruption we've seen from previous eruptions. Who knows, maybe we'll even be able to turn this force of destruction into an agent for good by exploiting the geothermal energy held in their giant magma reservoirs.
The
We've
Earth
done
is
this
our
work for so many
battery.
other disasters, and we are already doing things we could only have dreamed about decades ago, like sending a probe to perform our first asteroid redirection test. With determination,
Ooh, yes!
humanity really can solve anything.
Oh, and we're back.
So while deep below us an angry hell is churning and waiting for its moment, you can sleep well tonight.
Oh, and that's
Learning how we can get
video.
ahead of catastrophes like climate change and supervolcanoes is interesting, but can also be challenging.
And the rest of this is just I'm gonna be giving thanks to the sponsor, Brilliant.org. Alright, folks, so I'm gonna pause this, and when we come back, I think you will see, well, the next video. Because, like I said, this is a two-parter. We're back. It's part 2. It's time to see about why we don't shoot nuclear waste into space. Or why
Here
we
in the
should.
Kurzgesagt labs, we test very important ideas to see what happens when you blow things up or play with black holes.
Oh boy.
Many of you suggested that we look into an idea that sounds reasonable. Shooting nuclear waste into space.
Yeah, why
It's
don't
one of
we
those
do that?
concepts that seems like an easy fix for one of the main problems with nuclear energy. But it turns out this idea is not just bad,
I mean, you could
but
even-
horribly bad. And it gets
I mean, you could technically even use the nuclear fuel, the nuclear waste, as the nuclear fuel to get it up. Boom.
worse the longer you think about it. Why is that?
Well, tell us, Cogsdraw. I'm sorry, I keep butchering that. And tell us, why don't
What
we
is
shoot
nuclear waste?
up?
Nuclear waste is a fuzzy term and comes in categories which vary from country to country. But in general, there are 3 broad levels. 90% is low-level nuclear waste, tools, gloves, or trash used at a nuclear facility that could be weakly contaminated with some short-lived radioactivity. This stuff is generally safe for normal disposal. 7%
Okay.
is intermediate-level nuclear waste, mostly materials that have been in close proximity to a reactor core long enough to become dangerously radioactive.
Oh.
With proper handling, it's either safely buried or melted down and mixed into glass or concrete and stored deep underground.
Okay.
So 97% of nuclear waste is similar to toxic byproducts from other industries. Not
That
great,
makes sense.
not terrible. We can handle it. The remaining 3% is where our problems begin. High-level nuclear waste is very concentrated spent fuel taken out of a reactor core. Formerly uranium, it's now made of various dangerous and often highly
Actual
radioactive elements.
uranium.
As a bonus, it's also incredibly hot and not easy to handle at all. This is what we
No
want
doubt
to shoot
about
into
that.
space. All in all, around 440 active nuclear reactors create about 11,000 tons of high-level nuclear waste each year. Since 1954, we've accumulated 400,000 tons of dangerous radioactive waste.
Oh, that ain't
Most
good.
countries are dealing with it by not dealing with it and kicking the can towards the future. Great. So
Yeah,
let's
great.
launch it into
That's great.
space.
A-holes.
According to scientists, space is big, and nobody lives there, so it seems perfect
Oop,
for
there
yeeting
goes
away
the
this
satellites.
mess. There are a few tiny problems, though. Problem 1,
great.
stuff ain't cheap.
No,
Even though
yeah,
spaceflight
it would
is getting
take
more
a
affordable,
fuck ton.
it's still extremely expensive. Just to get something into low Earth orbit costs on average about $4,000 per kilogram. Putting that into perspective, it costs about $1,600 to mine, separate and fabricate 1 kilogram of nuclear fuel, so launching waste into space has suddenly made nuclear fuel for reactors way more expensive and
Damn.
greatly increased the cost of the electricity they produce. To launch 1 reactor's
is
worth of
something.
nuclear waste would cost at least $100 million per year. To deal
God.
with all the 440
Maybe that's why
operational
we
nuclear
should've.
power plants' high-level nuclear waste would cost some $44 billion per year for space launch before packaging, transport and security costs are added. Okay, let's pretend we don't care. Currently, we couldn't shoot
Yes,
all the
we're rich
nuclear
enough
waste
to
into
do it.
space even if we wanted to. There just aren't enough rockets. In 2021, we saw a record 135 launches into space. If we repurposed each of those rockets and filled them all with nuclear waste, the total amount that could be lifted into a low Earth orbit, which is the closest orbit above the atmosphere, is nearly 800 tons. We'd need at least 14 times more rockets to handle just today's nuclear waste, let alone get rid of the hundreds of thousands of tons in temporary storage.
Jeez.
We would need to create entire new space industries to keep up with the demand for giant, toxic space trash trucks. And it gets worse.
We're back.
Problem 2, space is hard.
More
We
like
only made
Hall
the
2,
calculation
really.
for low Earth
But,
orbit,
yeah.
where we send most of our rockets and satellites. Littering the space around Earth with thousands of casks of spent nuclear
And
fuel would be a
there it
nightmare
goes.
for space junk management and satellite collision avoidance. Worse still, at this altitude, there's still a little bit of atmosphere causing a tiny bit of drag, so we might have nuclear waste raining down from space within just a few years.
Ooh,
Experts would call this a huge problem.
Oh, Godzilla!
Clearly, we have to launch our waste further.
That ain't good.
If we wanted to send it to, perhaps, the moon, we either need way more rockets or we need to build much bigger ones, making it even more expensive. A single Saturn V, the rocket used by the Apollo program, which cost around $1.5 billion
Well, you don't
adjusted
need it
for
to come
inflation
back,
per
so
launch,
you really
could
just
get
need, like,
about
a strong
43.5
missile.
tons from the Earth to the moon. So we'd need about 260 Saturn V rocket launches every year. And of course, using the moon as target practice for nuclear waste-tipped rockets kind of makes a huge mess.
Oh, look,
So maybe
Moon
don't aim
Godzilla.
for anything.
How?
Space is empty. Do we really need a target? Shooting waste in any random direction is, you guessed it, also a bad idea.
Oh, come on.
Orbits are loops, which means they have a tendency to come
Oh.
back to where they started. Put enough in the sky in
boy.
random directions, and you'll get one back eventually. So we'd want to launch our nuclear
actually
waste
kind of
deep
cool.
into space, which means we need even bigger rockets that would be even more expensive. Not that we would be completely safe then. Earth might run into these interplanetary caskets at some time in the far future
Yep,
and
there it
experience
goes.
a pretty meteor shower made from radioactive dust. Okay, how
Not
about we
good.
shoot it into the sun?
Oh, that's an
Ironically,
option.
the sun is pretty hard to hit. While the sun has very strong gravity,
Wait, how's
everything
it-
on Earth is moving with respect to the sun, including
Oh.
the rockets that we launch, meaning a rocket would have to cancel out all the orbital motion it has around the sun so it can stop orbiting and fall in. Because of
Okay,
this,
so
it's
that
actually
would be
easier to launch a
difficult.
rocket entirely out of the solar system than it is to launch it into the sun.
With
But to do
gravitational
either of these
slingshot.
things, we need even bigger rockets,
Slingshot.
probably the biggest
I'm
we've
not
ever
saying that
built.
right, but you know what I'm talking about.
Nothing works. The thing is, it gets even worse. Problem 3, rockets go brrr. Rocket engineering has taken
Meme.
huge
Love
steps
it.
since the Apollo era. We've made them relatively safe. We've mostly replaced the toxic explosive cancer fuels of the past decades with much saner mixes of liquid oxygen and hydrogen or kerosene. The newest
Nice.
designs even land themselves so that they can be reused.
Nice.
And yet, out of the 146 launches in 2021, there were 11 failures, which means that a sizable number of our rockets carrying high-level radioactive waste would be exploding on the launch pad, or in the worst case, disassembling at high altitude or crashing from hypersonic speeds.
Damn.
Each failure would be at least equivalent to a mini Chernobyl, but instead of being contained under a slab of concrete, spread throughout the atmosphere. Radioactive
Yeah, we would
particles
just
could
be
make their
fucking
way to
ourselves
faraway
over.
places by riding on the winds. Most would fall into the ocean, but some would land on the inhabited parts of the world. They could cover farmlands and get concentrated into our food or enter our water supply. Which is, well, bad.
Damn it.
Imagine regular large-scale nuclear disasters happening. People wouldn't be happy. Conclusion
Spider
and
eggplant.
opinion part. Nuclear waste is scary, but the fear of it, and horrible ideas like shooting it into space, reveals how bad we are at understanding risk.
Yeah.
Because the largest amounts of radioactive
way for
elements
us to
like
just
uranium
get
and
rid of
radon
it.
are actually released by coal. Burning millions of tons of coal each year leaves ash as a waste product that includes about 36,000 tons of radioactive materials. Less radioactive than high-level nuclear waste, but there's also a lot more of it, and it's handled way less carefully.
Wow.
Some of this ash is caught by filters but most is simply pushed back into leaky mines, shoved into piles exposed to the wind, or poured into ponds that regularly spill into rivers and lakes.
That ain't good.
Living within 1.6 kilometers of an ash pile increases your cancer risk up to 2,000 times over the acceptable limit. And this is on top of other toxic chemicals like heavy metals and, of course, their massive CO2 emissions. And yet, while nuclear energy is flawed and its current form may only be a transitory technology, nuclear power plants are a harder sell than coal. Nuclear waste and the lack of willingness to deal with it are a real issue. It's not insurmountable, though. There are good methods to handle it, like burying it deep underground or reprocessing some of it into new fuel. But however we ultimately deal with this issue, we hope one thing is clear. Shooting nuclear waste into space is one of the worst ideas ever.
Yeah, that's not good at all.
Researching this crazy thing, conducting all of these important tests, and of course, creating this video took us around 2,000 hours, which is insane for a YouTube video. And we couldn't do it without you. If you like what you just saw, you can continue your science journey with one of our products. They're true pieces.
Looks like the last of this is them gonna be just sponsoring themselves, which I am completely okay with, but that is the end of today's video. So I want you all to remember to like, comment, and subscribe to both me and the original creators. Link to both videos will be in the description below, so remember to check them out and support them. And I'll see all of you folks next time when we flick on. This is Fox, signing out.